going on, guys? This is Matt Royalty Real here today, and I'm back with another podcast episode. This is part 2 of my conversation with Brandon Draven, aka Pedro Nunez from the KLB podcast. Check it out. So, a couple more questions before we dive. I'm not keeping you too long, am I?
No, I'm good.
Who is your favorite wrestler of all time?
I have Ric Flair. I'm gonna just say Ric Flair, but it varies. It varies between Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, and Bret Hart. But on this day, even though Ric Flair's kind of like bastardizing himself by wrestling again when he shouldn't.
He's about to wrestle Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, right?
Yeah, but Ricky Steamboat said no. He passed. He's like, no, I'm straight. I can't do that. You know, if this dude collapses in the ring and passes away, which we hope not.
I hope not.
I don't want to be in the middle of it when it happens. So he straight out said no. So I guess they're looking for another opponent now. But I mean, you know, the thing about Ric Flair, obviously, when I was a kid, he was like my hero, right? He's everybody. Any teenager that wants to be cool will idolize young Ric Flair because that guy had it all. He knew how to talk. He had the chicks. He had the money. He had the cool clothes. Everything, right? It was the perfect hero for a generation of teenage kids. Maybe like young adults, even early 20s. But then as you get older and you see the tragedy of the man and what kind of a man he really is in real life, then it becomes more like that's kind of sad, you know, and the fact that he would spend all his money. And so I see him more as a guy that's very like in a lot of pain emotionally and just never been able to really deal with it. So this is how he deals with it. He just parties all the time and just, you know, spends all his money and all that stuff. And so for a long time, you know, he was a legend and he was always broke. And I would always say, how is this guy broke when he made all that money, but he spent it all?
I think so, that's a thing when it comes to somebody who grew up in poverty and you get money like in wrestling and basketball, football, baseball, period. Like there has to be a way to you need training once you get there. You just can't give a dude from the hood a shitload of money and say, here, you're gonna fuck it off if you don't know how to live with that. You don't know how to get $1 million.
That's what happened to MC Hammer. He was broke because of the same. Well, the thing too was that like it's not only that you get all that money, it's all the leeches that come out of nowhere and they got their hand extended and like give me, you know, all the homies from the hood come out of nowhere and they're like, remember me when you were broke? Give me money. And you trying to be the cool guy because, again, when you grow up in the hood, there is this loyalty that's embedded in you to be loyal to the hood for the rest of your life. So every time that you get a little cheese, you got to spread it around. Exactly. And a lot of these guys, especially like a lot of these athletes, they came up like that. And so that's what they do. And next thing you know, they're broke. And then all these homies, they go back into their caves and you don't see them anymore, you know? And it's like, so we have to have education on how to handle your money. At the same time, you know,
it's a balance too, because people say, "Oh, you turn your back on the hood," but you look at somebody like Nipsey Hussle who didn't turn his back on the hood and tried to create a real business in there. And what happens? He gets killed in front of his business in LA.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. That was a big deal when it happened here in LA. I mean, it was a huge deal. I mean, it was a huge deal around the world, but really here it's big. You know,
people don't understand. In LA, we actually felt it. Like we felt the impact of that in LA. Like even if you didn't know who he was, you felt like that. Damn.
And it was sad too because you know he was one of the good guys. He was a pillar of the community, and a lot of his money was invested in those smaller like businesses. Like it wasn't like he went up and opened like a Del Taco or like a McDonald's somewhere. You know, he was investing his money in the smaller like mom and pop businesses that are needed to thrive to kind of push that middle class. You know, and then look at what happened. So it goes to show you like you know, with me like. When as far as morality and ethics and all that stuff, I am a believer that you know, sometimes there is injustices in the world and we have to get past that. You know, I mean, I think a lot of people, going back to the mental health talk, they get stuck on this idea of why me, and that stagnates your growth because there's almost this egotistical nature of like I want to be a victim forever because it justifies me being in the position that I'm in. So if you consistently continue to say, oh, why did this happen to me? Why me? You're going to stay in that position forever. But at the same time, you're going to justify it by saying, well, this happened to me, so I could stay here even though I'm not happy. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to say. Is like there is injustices in the world, and the world is not fair. And once you get past that, then you're able to live a more fulfilling life, because it's like sometimes bad shit's gonna happen to good people, and that's just the reality of it. There is no reason why. There is no justice. It just happens.
Yeah. That's one of the fucked up things about living here on Earth.
That's right. But it's part of the human experience. Going back to that, I mean, why that to me, I'm not gonna allow that to devalue all the magical moments I've experienced in this life as well. They both have the same value to me. The tragedies and the successes, the happiness and the sadness, it's two sides of the same coin. And that's what people fail to understand, is that all the hard times that you've gone through are only gonna make the good times even sweeter, because you're going to be able to compare. And it's like, oh wow, if we didn't have any hard times, these great moments would have no value to us. It's the bad times that give the good times their value.
Right. But right before I get into these questions from the group, I'm not going to mention their names because I didn't get a chance to ask them if they don't mind their name being mentioned. So.
Well, there's one guy here that I wouldn't even be able to say his name even if I tried. So
I'm gonna butcher his shit.
Yeah.
Last question from me is who are your top 3 talkers in the business?
Hold on, I got an ambulance over here because I am there, pass by. I'm in a semi-decent neighborhood now that I moved up in the world, but the ambulance is still passing by here. Are you familiar with like the Pasadena area in LA?
Yeah. My mom is from Pasadena.
Oh wow, okay, cool. Yeah, that's where I live now. So Pasadena, Alhambra area, kind of.
Yeah, it depends on what part of Pasadena you're in, because you still got some areas, but if you're on the Alhambra side, you're good.
Yeah. So my okay, so Ric Flair is my number 1.
Talker?
The Rock, yes.
Okay.
The Rock is my number 2. And Dusty Rhodes would be my number 3.
Ooh.
Yeah, those are my top 3 talkers of all time, because those 3 wrestlers were able to connect through the television. They were able to connect with the people, and that's incredibly well. I don't even think it's possible today, because the wrestling business has changed so much that it's not even possible to connect anymore. Now it's more of a Harlem Globetrotters coming to your town, and it's a show, and we all get a good laugh, and we go home and we forget about it. At another time, wrestling was more of a sport. It was like an event of like the 2 best guys colliding for the title, and so we were more emotionally connected to them. And Ric Flair, Dusty, and The Rock were all able to talk us into the arenas or talk us into buying the pay-per-view, which ultimately is what makes a great talker. The ability for them to get you to pay your money for you to see them, that's what makes a great talker.
Yeah, my top 3 is Flair, Jericho, and Heyman.
Oh, very good. Jericho would have been my number 4 favorite wrestler of all time.
Yeah.
I've told this story on the podcast, on my podcast before, but from the time I was 17 to the time I was about 24, I looked exactly like them. My goal was to emulate Chris Jericho, and I had the long hair. I had a decent body. I had the facial. Remember, he used to fuck with his facial hair a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I did that. There was one year where he decided to grow his goatee or the bottom of his beard really, really long. I did the same thing. I even tied it with a rubber band. So yeah, and then I've been able to actually party with him, because when Fozzy started, they weren't drawing flies on shit. They were not drawing any people. They were just like this rock and roll band who would play these little clubs. And back in 2004, after a show, I think it was a Raw, I went to go check them out at a little club. And then after the show, they were just hanging out drinking. So I went there and I had a nice little conversation with him, like a real conversation. It wasn't like a Mark talking to a wrestler. It was like two men drinking, talking. So that was one of my, that's one of my best experiences. We talked about horror movies, because I'm a big horror movie buff. I always have been. And he as well. That's why he named his kid Ash after the character from Evil Dead. And then we have a lot of things in common. So we talked about all kinds of shit, but it was a great experience.
He seemed like he'd be a cool ass person in person to meet anyway. So yeah, he's one of
well, his politics are, I wouldn't agree with his politics, but yeah, other than that, he's a cool guy.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question I'm going to get into from the group is, what is a piece of advice you would give to someone to start their graduate studies?
Okay, so you really have to, if you have a family, which a lot of people that tend start their graduate studies, because that tends to come later in life. A lot of them already have kids, have a wife. They have to be really supportive. That's step number one. Everybody has to be in on the plan, because being a grad student is very taxing, and it's something you have to normalize before you start your graduate program. You have to normalize how intense it's going to be. You have to normalize that you're essentially going to have two jobs for a very long time, which is your graduate program and whatever job you do to live. If once you come to terms with that, then it makes it easier, because you could have like study time where your kids and your wife know, okay, he's studying for now, let's leave him alone, let's give him an hour, like maybe an hour every 2 days or whatever. And that's all cool. So it's very important that your family is on board with this, because if they're not, that's going to make it very, very hard, because there's going to be emotions there where the wife was going to want a little extra time, the kids are going to be asking for time, and it's going to really kind of it's going to want to make you give up, and we don't want that, because that's only going to affect how you feel by yourself. So having everybody on board is important. If you don't have any kids and if you don't have a wife, then just understanding how difficult and time consuming, that's the key thing, time consuming being a grad student is, because it's, you have to do research. Being a grad student is not just going to class anymore. You have to actually show a lot of research on your studies. So that takes a lot of going out of your way to go like online. Now it's online. Back then it was the library, and just doing your research, completing your papers, doing your presentations, and just being active, in
really
your studies. It is time consuming. Trust me, I know. Okay. And then I think I have them up too, so I guess I could read some of them as well.
Okay.
How do you rediscover your passion and motivation? I think that's an interesting question, because I think in order to really be passionate, you have to inherently be a passionate person, which I am, and I know a lot of people are as well. It's very difficult to be passionate when you're a very passive person, and that's where complacency comes from, and there's people out there that are just satisfied with living like on minimum wage and just kind of just living paycheck to paycheck, and that's fine, because I don't judge anybody. Everybody has their own journey, so that's okay. But if you're asking how you rediscover your passion and motivation, it helps to be a passionate person from the get-go. And then from there, just start embedding yourself in that passion. Because what happens is that a lot of the time, we don't even take that first step. We're like, okay, I want to be passionate about this. This is what I like, but I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, and then again and again and again. So passion is connected to habits. You have to establish new habits that are feeding your passion, and within that, you're going to discover that it's going to become the norm, and you're going to pursue your passion again. And keep this in mind too: every time you hit every time you hit like a benchmark in your passion, it's only going to enhance your self-esteem. For example, let's just say my passion is music, right? And then let's just say I'm like, I think I want to play again. I want to play in front of a live crowd. Let me see if I can get myself booked at a bar that only has like 8 people. Okay, so you meet that benchmark, and that's gonna feel good. So from there, you're gonna go, let me see if I could book myself at a theater now where it's gonna have like 100 people, and you go from there and there and there, and that passion is gonna fuel you, because you're gonna want to continue to establish those goals to go higher and higher. The problem is that here's the problem. Before people even start doing any of this, they create a narrative in their mind. Before they even start. So let's say I want to go. Let's go back to that. I want to play music. I'm thinking, should I go book? No, if I go and they tell me no, then I gotta go pick up the kids. That's okay. I'll do it another time. So you don't even get to go to that first step of booking yourself in that bar with 8 people, and you blow out your flame. You just you turn off your candle. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's an issue I deal with a lot too, with because I had started my podcast last year, and then I got a couple of no's and I got discouraged, and I'm just like, well, damn, this is fucking, I'm not getting the reception I want, and I'm just like, but you know what? Am I doing it for the reception, or am I doing this because it makes me happy?
That's right, and it makes you happy, and once it makes you happy, then you got to keep on doing it. Here's another thing about passion that's very important. Sometimes the flame is extremely hot, and you have to follow your passion when you have that thirst for it, because it's very temporary. And if you contribute in turning off your own candle, then you're never going to experience allowing yourself to fulfill that passion. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be like, well, I wasn't worth it anyways. But deep down in your soul, you know you wanted to do that. So it's important to just do that first step. Don't start creating narratives in your mind before you take that first step, because a lot of our brain, so the thing about our brain is that it's inherently lazy. It's organically a lazy thing that we use. So your brain is going to try to talk you out of it. But your soul and your spirit, which is really where your passion comes from, is going to want to do it. So there's going to be a conflict there. You need to listen to your spirit for your own mental health and for your own internal happiness. It's very important. And you did it, and I admire you for that.
Yeah, another thing on that same subject for me, what helps me, because I have a lot of different passions, and a lot of people don't. Some people are tunnel vision when it comes to their passions, but mine are this podcasting thing. I like to make music, and I have a passion for politics, and I'm also writing a book. And so for me, if I get discouraged on one, or I can't, like, creative juices are different than other things. For me, creatively, if one is not going, then I jump to the next one. So say I can make a song today, which I did make a song 2 days ago, but I'm like, okay, I can't think of a new idea for a song. Okay, but what I can do is write in my book today.
Yeah.
So it's pushing myself, and then once I start getting into it, I'm like, well, damn, I didn't mean to write a whole 10 pages today, but I wrote 10 pages because I let it come out. I had, like you said, taking the first step.
And you know what makes me sad about people is that when they convince themselves that not following their passions isn't a big deal, because you're essentially hurting your spirit. You're denying your spirit to come out and thrive. And it's important as a human being to be able to explore that part of your life. And I think a lot of times, especially people that have families, and I completely understand, because having a family is very stressful, and it's something at that point you can't think just about yourself. You can't be selfish, and it's very difficult. But what I always tell people is the family should support you, because when you follow your passions, everybody wins. You're coming home more content, you're coming home more fulfilled, which in turn is going to allow the family unit to thrive. They have a figurehead that's satisfied in other aspects of their lives. And what I mean by figurehead, let's just say is the mom or the dad. They have more enjoyment out of what they love. And actually, what the research has shown in couples is that if you use that, if you're allowed to pursue your passion, that sense of, because when you're passionate, we have what we call dopamine that gets it's a chemical in our brain, and we get like a shot of it, and it makes us feel very euphoric. Right. So a lot of times that euphoria connects the couple even more, because you're actually feeding off of the passion. So for example, if a guy wants to be a writer and he's writing and he gets his book published, that euphoric feeling from that goal that was met is going to translate to the relationship, and both people are going to be better off for it if there is an understanding and if there is communication. Because what we don't want is the girlfriend or the wife to all of a sudden be jealous of that success. That's a whole nother conversation. Right. But in general, if it's a healthy relationship, then pursuing your passions is very, very important to that relationship success. And it really does help everybody. And I know it's hard, because when you think about it, it sounds detrimental, because it's less time spent with your significant others, but the time that is there is going to be more valuable.
Yeah, I was just going to say that quality time increases because you're happy in life.
Right. Instead of just pouting or just giving that negative vibe, which we see a lot of households in, where you have like unsatisfied personal goals between the relationship. That's where you don't want to be. And a lot of times the result of that is because people are not allowed to pursue their passions, because they're so stressed out about the bills and the mortgage and the car payment and all that goes with having a family. So to answer the question, it's important to pursue your passion. How do you find your motivation, your passion? You got to take that first step and allow yourself that ability to reach your benchmarks within your passion, instead of just listening to that original narrative that's going to give you all the reasons in the world not to pursue that.
Okay, let's go to his last question. I think this one will be funny for both of us to answer. Lastly, if you were in a barroom brawl, who is the one wrestler you'd want backing you up? You can go ahead and go
It would have to be Bill Watts, man. Bill Watts carried a gun to the CNN center when he was running WCW, even though he was one of the corporate heads. This is a man that would walk outside the balcony at the CNN center and take the piss because he didn't want, the restroom was too far. Bill Watts was a man that would want to fight other promoters, and if he won that fight, he would be able to take over your promotion, and that's legit. Bill Watts was a man who, if there was a fight in his locker room with his wrestlers and he wasn't there, he would show up and he would make them start the fight over again just because, to make up for what he missed. This is a man's man from back in the day, you know, from the era of wooden ships. I mean, he was one of those guys that yeah, so that's who I would want backing me up, because that guy wouldn't take no shit from no one.
For me, it would be New Jack.
Oh yeah, New Jack too. New Jack was a crazy mofo.
Yeah, he's a crazy motherfucker. I don't think I'm gonna get out of there alive. I know that.
That's right. That's right. And even if he went down, he's gonna take 3-4 dudes down with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to read the next one?
When Natural Born Killer is playing in the background the whole time.
Exactly.
Okay. So let me see. I've asked this before, but I can't find the episode. Can you do a quick rundown of the Staircase of Self-Esteem? Also, any advice for people with abandonment issues and depression would be nice if possible. So the Staircase of Self-Esteem is the idea that I've already brought out before. When you don't feel like you deserve love, when you don't feel like you deserve accomplishments, you just don't do them, and it becomes this vicious cycle of validating of how you already feel. Self-esteem is, what we do is, they're building blocks. So you establish your list of goals, and they should be attainable. They should be small, and they should be something that you could measure. And you attain that goal, and then you move on to the next one and the next one. And it's, as you're doing that, is building up how you see yourself. Because let's start with somebody who's at the very bottom, right? Let's start with somebody who was abandoned as a kid, who was abused as a kid. It all starts with being a kid, if you haven't noticed. That's very critical to our development. So if you have no self-worth because you were told all your life that you don't matter, that you're unlovable, that you're a burden, that's literally every single thing that you filter in your life is going to be filtered through those lenses. Everything, every single thing. And so what starts to happen is that you don't do anything because you're scared, because you go back to that idea of like, I don't deserve this. You see that a lot with women who've been abused by, domestic violence victims who've been abused by a male perpetrator. He has them so lost and has taken their identity so bad that they don't see themselves as less than nothing, because they have no identity. They've been manipulated and gaslighted their entire lives to not see themselves as to their potential. So you start with the building blocks. You start with some people are so bad that let's just start with going outside and going for a walk, because some people are so scared. They've been so damaged that they're scared to even go outside because the anxiety is riddled so much that they can't even go outside. So let's start with going outside. Let's go around the block. Okay, that's one step. I saw that I didn't die. I saw that nobody attacked me. Now let's go to the store. Okay, and it moves on. We call it exposure therapy. You're exposing yourself to your fear, and every time you conquer your fear, it's like another building block to your self-esteem, and you're getting higher and higher and higher. And pretty soon you'll see that you don't need anyone. Everybody in this world is only here to enhance you. They're not here to complete you, which is a big misconception that our Western culture has perpetrated, especially with women. So you'll start to see that you could do this by yourself. And pretty soon you're only gonna allow the people that are gonna make you better into your life. And you no longer need the people that you feel are gonna fill you up internally, because you fill yourself up. You don't need them anymore. So that's really, in a very simplistic way, that's really the staircase of self-esteem. It's just going to the next level and the next level and the next level. But it does take for you to take that first step, which is the hardest step for a lot of people to take.
Right.
So anything you wanted to add to that?
No, really. I've never heard of the staircase of self-esteem, but that actually is very helpful. Actually.
Yeah. And let me just say, when it comes to abandonment issues and depression, first of all, he's asking a very vague question, so I'm not really going to get into specifics, because depression and abandonment could mean 1,000 different things. But what happens with let me just say the more common thing that happens with people that are abandoned. So when people are abandoned, they have what we call like an anxious attachment, okay? Because of the abandonment issues, they're constantly anxious about any new relationship that they encounter, and they self-sabotage that relationship because they don't want to go through that again, which in turns makes them feel lonely. So you start to see this cycle that starts to happen, because it's like, let's just say I was abandoned, okay? And let's just say I meet someone, whether it's a friend or a girlfriend or whatever. I start having anxiety over that because there's a part of my subconscious that remembers the abandonment, and thus I don't want to be abandoned again. So what am I going to do? I'm going to leave before they abandon me. So I create a scenario, like a self-sabotaging scenario, where I push those people away. And then when I'm alone again, because of what I just did, it's like, yeah, see, I told myself nobody wants me, and I am abandoned again. So it's this vicious cycle of like fulfilling how you already feel about yourself, which is negative, and it just goes on and on and on. So, and that's a pattern that you see constantly with people, and they wonder why they're alone. Well, they're alone because they're too scared to allow themselves to be loved by someone else, and so they continuously push those people away, and it just validates how they already feel.
Yeah, I've had a couple of friends who are afraid to get in relationships again and everything, and it's like it's a risk of getting hurt. And I gave them a metaphor. I was just like, you take a risk of getting hit by a car more when you step outside every day. But do you still go outside? Do you still go to work? Do you still
well, and that's a great metaphor, by the way. But the one that I like to use is when somebody's in your life and they're respecting you, that's it. You've done enough. You don't have to stress out about what you got to do to retain that person. If a person's in your life and they want to love you, whatever you've been doing that's been you, it's already been enough. They're already there. You don't have to convince them to stay there. And a lot of people that don't allow themselves to be loved, a lot of people that fear rejection or abandonment, they have that anxiety of like, oh my God, they're gonna leave. What do I do? What do I do to retain them? You know what? I don't want them to leave, so I'm just gonna push them away. No, if they're there because they already find something about you that they like and they enjoy, and just accept that. Just accept the fact that somebody's there, and whatever they do after that is going to be because they're reacting to their own issues. It's not personal to you. And so that's the philosophy that should be adapted when we're in these situations of fear of abandonment, because that's got to be a heavy burden to constantly worry about people leaving you. It's not a way to live life, because then you're never really going to be happy, because you're always going to be under this anxiety of abandonment.
Right.
And depression, I mean, again, that's a very you know what, let's skip that one, because that one's very vague and there's a lot to say about that. So maybe we'll do it for another show.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a very popular thing, and popular in the sense that a lot of people are going through it, but it also requires a very deep explanation, and so we could save it for another time.
Types of depression, and it affects you different ways. I deal with depression, but my depression is not somebody else's depression. So
that's right, and there's different ways to deal with it. I will say that one of the things that I'll just say this really quick. One of the habits that we get into when we're depressed is that we empower our depression, because it's the easiest thing in the world to do, to wallow in your depression. And so one of the best interventions to do when you're dealing with depression is what we call opposite action. Do the opposite of what you would do if you're depressed at the time that you're depressed. And it does help. You know, whether it's going out for a walk or going out to the record store and checking out some vinyls. That's what I like to do. Or like going out with your friends to watch a movie. You're forcing your brain to create that U-turn and say, I don't want to do this. All I want to do is lay in my bed and just tune out the world. But I'm going to do an opposite action today as an intervention for myself to see where it puts me. And a lot of the times it does change your mood, even if it's for that moment, which a lot of times with depression, as you know, because you just said you suffer from it. When we're dealing with depression, we're trying to take it day to day. We're not thinking about a week. We're not thinking about a month. We're just thinking, let me get through this day. And then whatever tomorrow brings. And sometimes what it takes just to get through this day is just to go watch a movie, go to a sporting event, whatever the case may be. And you got through the day. And a lot of the times your mood is going to be a little better. Now, if it goes back the next day as depressed, well, then we'll deal with it with something else. But here's the key factor. Don't wallow in the depression, because you're empowering it, you're normalizing it. Your brain is getting used to the serotonin output, which is very dangerous, and then that's what leads to situations. So it's very important that you challenge your depression, and you're very capable of doing it, unless you need to be medicated, which is a whole other conversation. But if you can,
there's some topics we can touch on if I have you on again. If you would be down to, I would love to have you on again.
Yeah, because again, some people do need to be medicated too when they're dealing with depression. That's a whole other conversation.
Let's get to this next question. He wrote a whole essay here, didn't he?
Yeah, Bernardo Paez. What are your thoughts on how the lack of resources and a lot of us minorities, I don't know why he had to use quotations for that, have when it comes to psychologist counseling can affect us long-term as a culture? Because I honestly feel like if you have the resources, everybody should talk to a therapist. It can go a long way. And last, I know you've said in the past many different ways to not focus on societal norms like being married by X and Y, or even getting married at all, or having kids. What helps you with that? Because I've been following that type of thinking for a while, but now I'm getting older and I haven't started stuff like college and study for psychology. Okay. Here's the mistake he's making. Mistake number one is that he's timelining his life, which is one of the biggest mistakes you could ever make. Don't ever put a timeline on your life, because that's going to create anxiety that you do not need. Don't compare yourselves. Everybody is on their own journey of self-discovery here. Everybody.
Right.
You have people say, well, why does my neighbor have this and I don't have it? Why does my cousin have this and I don't have it? Well, that's because you haven't lived their life and they haven't lived yours. We don't know what kind of opportunities they've had that you haven't had. We don't know what kind of obstacles everybody's different. Everybody, even twins are different.
Right.
So to sit there and compare your life to another is very unfair to you, because you're not even playing on the same field. It's two completely different perspectives following two different objectives. And that's something that we have to remember when we're in the situation of comparing ourselves to someone else. And here's another thing. Nothing prohibits you from establishing goals to accomplish on your own, even if you do have the anxiety of like, how come this person has this and I don't have it? Well, then here's the answer to that. Go get it then. And if it starts the next day, where you're gonna pull up your big boy pants and say, okay, this is the day where I start this because I want that. Guess what? That's a goal, and that's great. Now go achieve it. What happens is that we get stuck in that misery of comparing ourselves, which is very egotistical and also very embedded in self-esteem, that we don't take action to get what we want. So it's very easy to say, my neighbor has this and I don't have it. I'm miserable because of that. But literally, there's nothing telling you can't achieve what you want to achieve. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is you're on a journey of discovering what you want, and there is no timeline for that. You could be getting your bachelor's degree at 45 years old. It doesn't matter, because nothing could take away your experience of your entire life trajectory. What's happening here is that this guy is comparing himself to other people that have quote unquote certifications or degrees. That doesn't mean anything, because guess what? Those other people that have degrees or certifications, they don't have the experiences you have. And there's a lot of positive experiences there as well. It's just they're not tangible, because there's not a shiny little paper that says you did this. But I always like to say this, and I know that you said earlier that you were homeless, and that's very difficult for a lot of people. But here's one thing about the homeless population. They always have a story to share. They always have experience. When you're homeless, you have to survive. And within that comes an insane amount of experience and things that are unique to yourself. Now, nobody's going to give you a degree for that, but yet it's something it's a tool that you have that you've used to survive. And so that in itself is an accomplishment.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Definitely. And it's enabled me to help these kids, because I have a different perspective on life that they didn't have. Bro, I'm 35 years old and I haven't accomplished everything that I've wanted to, but the fact that I've lived this long, and that's what you got to ask yourself, are you alive? Then you still can accomplish these things.
Right. And
still accomplish whatever the fuck you want to accomplish.
Right. And so that's the thing, that people that were let's say homelessness lasted a year, which is a long time. the level of experience, the level of character that you build for that year is, it's, you can't put a value on it. And it's tragic, and there's a lot of PTSD that probably comes out of that for sure. But at the same time, there's also a lot of wisdom that comes out of that. And yet somebody like that is not going to get certification or a degree or whatever, even though it's a valuable tool to use in your daily life. So the point of all this being, don't measure yourself to these degrees or these certifications or anything that you could see of value. Measure yourself to the life, the quality of life that you've lived. And that's really what's important. And allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to forgive yourself for those mistakes. Because here's another thing. A lot of the times, our decisions are created not from ourselves, but from our state of mind. Or sometimes if we're going through depression, guess what? We're not going to be very active. If we're going through depression, guess what? We're going to make mistakes. We're probably going to burn some bridges because our depression is being interpreted or presented as anger. So as you get better with your mood, you could reflect and say, that wasn't me that did that. That whole year that I was depressed, I'm going to forgive myself for that because I was ill. Why would I expect myself to do anything more than what I did, which was survive every day? So we have to reflect on our lives and think about where we were when we were making these decisions. Were we being manipulated by our culture? Were we being guided by our trauma? Were our options limited? These are all things that we forget about, especially when we compare ourselves to other people. And we're very hard on ourselves for that. And it just creates a lot of anxiety that's unnecessary in our lives. This is your life. And I have a very existential philosophy, which is like, there's a day that you're born and there's a day that you die. And in between that, you get to define your life however you want.
Right.
And as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, there's absolutely nothing that should get in the way of defining your life that you want. As long as you're spiritually and mentally congruent with that, then it should be okay.
Yeah. I want to touch on the beginning part of what he said. What are your thoughts on the lack of resources to a lot of us minorities?
The quote unquote minorities, as he put
it. It pisses me off because I grew up in a lot of neighborhoods that weren't like that. And I've experienced it. Like the less money you have, the less opportunity you have to get good healthcare, period, but especially mental health care, because I've been bounced around and everything, and it sucks. But also we have to increase the knowledge of people. Like we need people to need to be aware of what's going on there. So I think the best thing is to flash a light on it. That's why I'm so passionate about politics. People are not. Go ahead.
No, well, I was going to say, and that's why I got into the field that I'm in, to create that change. Circling back to the beginning of this conversation, there is a lot of oppression in our quote unquote minority groups, right? There is a lot of that, and a lot of that. To piggyback on your politics statement, it's like there's certain groups that want to retain the power. They want to retain the power. So what do? They create systems of imbalance just to keep us in a certain place. Because for better or worse, the resources of this earth are limited. So right. you have people in positions of power that are doing everything that they can to retain that power for generational influence, while creating scenarios to keep minorities out of that power. And it's done in systemic ways. We do see like systemic racism all over the country. We do see systemic forms of oppression everywhere, from employment to mental health opportunities. All these things are there to keep the generational status quo where it's at. And that is a good point, because what happens is that as minorities, we start to get frustrated with our way of life, because we start to hit a wall after a while. And so we have no way to properly express that. So we turn on ourselves for that. And that's when we start, that's where you see neighborhoods that are embedded in crime and theft and sexual assault, because it's this, I like to term it as this big old ball of like anger and frustration, where we're kept in a certain system where that frustration and anger has no place to go. So we turn on ourselves, and we just kind of validate that kind of mentality over and over again. So right. we do have to break through these walls, and we do have to make our own change.
Right.
That's why in my later years, when I used to see all these radicalized people in the rallies or whatnot, I used to say, because I remember I told you earlier, I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore because the puppeteers, the elite, they kind of want us there. They want us
Oh yeah.
marching because they're like, oh, they're just marching. We still have them at bay. No, here's how you beat the system. You become their neighbors. That's what they really hate.
Oh yeah.
And the way to become their neighbors is through education. You educate yourself, you get yourself a certain the thing about this country is that it really values titles, and I don't like that for the reasons that I said in the previous statement. I don't like, but we have to play by their rules. So it's like, okay, well then as a minority, I'm going to become a doctor, I'm going to become a lawyer, I'm going to become a psychologist, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to go live next to them, because the moment I'm next to them, then I have some political power around that community. And that's how you start creating change, not marching all up and down the streets, because
Right.
they could still manipulate that, they could still turn it on, which we've seen.
Oh yeah,
So
they villainize those people so often, and they make them look like they're the bad guys for standing up.
that's right. That's right. So it's important that I like to use the educational route to really get through and get to the next level, because that's something that cannot be taken. Education could never be taken from you. That's something that they could take your house, they could take your property, your car, everything, but your education is permanent forever. And that's one of the best investments you could ever make. But as a minority, it also puts you at another level, and hopefully you help others, reach that level when you have some sort of influence. And that's how you start creating that generational change. But to the original question, it is very frustrating, because even like with tuition, like with college tuition, like, I remember when I was in undergrad, they raised it like $1,000. And I know a lot of people in my community were like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it now. My whole thing was like, listen, if I gotta eat some ramen noodles for another year, that's what I'm gonna do. But I'm not gonna quit college, because that's my way out, And so
Right.
I think they make it hard for us to, it's almost like they move the goalposts, right? They keep on moving the
Oh yeah.
goalpost, and then pretty soon you're like, well, I guess I'm just gonna stay here. To me, it's like, no, it's gonna be harder. More sacrifices are gonna be needed, but you have to get through that goalpost. And there's just, there's no other way, because then you're gonna be relying on them for the rest of your life, and they're gonna keep you where you're at. And so
That's why
that's what's important.
that's why I want to run for office one day. Probably in a few years, I'm going to run for office. I say I don't want to go as high as president, because that's too much, but I want to make change on the local level, and hopefully get to Congress and start helping make a change there.
No, that's beautiful. I love that you have those aspirations, and you're young enough to still do it, and you have the energy, and that's great. And it is very possible to get there. But at the same time, you also know there's going to be a lot of sacrifices that are going to
Oh,
be
definitely.
needed. You know,
Definitely. My wife is
um,
already knowing, and I know people are going to try to chop us down. The higher you get, the more shit you got to deal with. So
yes, and it's like I always like to say, like, you have the elite who are like, oh, well, I accomplished this, and I'm a self-made millionaire. And it's like, to use a baseball term, it's like when you start at third base, it's easy for you to go home. But
exactly.
when you're forced to hit a home run every single time, that's hard. And minorities are forced to always hit a home run, because anything less than that, and we're gonna get pushed back. And that's what makes it more challenging.
The elite's favorite phrase is, "I pulled myself up with my own bootstraps."
That's right. And it's like, yeah, but you were in third base the whole time, you were already there. So yeah, so no, for sure, Bernardo Paez, it is very frustrating to have lack resources, because it just continues that cycle of violence, that cycle of crime, and really influences other minorities to continue those negative behaviors on and on and on and on. But going right back to what I said, what could you do to help your situation? That's what's important. Don't worry about the rest of the world right now, because we don't have those resources. Let's worry about what you can do to later on have that kind of leverage to be able to help others. That's really what's important.
Right.
All right, let me see.
Next
So let's
question.
okay, what advice would either of you give for graduates looking to start their careers? How do you network professionally? How do you keep with developments in your fields? Well, he kind of answered his own question, because let's start with how do you keep up with developments in your fields? Well, I think anytime you're passionate about something, especially in my field, you do have to keep educating yourself. And that's a commitment that you make when you go into this field. There's two commitments that I made, and everybody has to make when you're dealing in mental health. A, keeping up with the advances in mental health, that obviously it would be ignorant not to, because then you would be out of touch and you could actually hurt someone if you don't keep up. And B, you really have to have some introspection. You have to know the kind of person that you are with an unbiased lens. In other words, everybody knows that prejudice thought affects all of us. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I'm sure you have a perception of Latinos. I have a perception of African Americans. That's just the way the human brain works. But you have to be aware of it, and you have to say, no, this is my prejudiced mind getting the better of me. I'm gonna stop right now. And that requires introspection. That requires knowing yourself as a human being at a deeper level than most people, to be able to catch yourself before you hurt someone following that train of thought. And everybody has it. There's nobody here that's gonna sit here and say, oh, I'm not prejudiced. You're lying. So you're already being prejudiced.
You all have some sort of prejudice. Now how you act on that prejudice is where things go. Are you gonna continue to think that way? Are you
That's right.
Have to challenge your own thinking? And okay, I'm gonna get to know this person, the real person, and see how they are. Oh, we're more the same than we are different. So
yeah. And as far as what advice do you have for graduates looking to start their careers, is hopefully you're passionate about your career, or else we're going to have a problem. So the idea here is that you are going to invest a lot of your free time into developing your skills, because it's an investment that you're making for your future. So if there's internships that ain't paying nothing, I suggest you take them for now, because that's where the networking starts. People are going to see your work ethic. And the thing about it is, work ethic does not lie. There's always going to be people out there in the world that are going to get a head up on you because of connections, even though their work ethic doesn't match. 9 times out of 10, those people are going to fail at their job. If you go into your career with a strong work ethic and a passion, that rises to the top all the time. People see that, people are gravitated towards that, and they're going to lift you up. And I've seen it happen time and time again, because people want to surround themselves with winners. That's just the way we are as human beings. So if you show up and you keep your mouth shut and your ears open during your first couple of years in whatever field you choose, you're going to learn a lot. And you're gonna show people. You're not gonna tell people, because words are free. You could say whatever you want, and ain't nobody gonna charge you a damn thing. But your actions, that's what has the real value. And people are always gonna want to hire you. They're gonna want you on their team, because they're gonna see how passionate you are, how many of these ideas you could share, and that's how you start building your rep. But one thing about grads is that you definitely have to pay your dues. I mean, you're not, and I think it's worth it, because you're gonna learn so much along the way.
Right.
Like for example, like with me, like I have a pretty good position where I'm at now, but let's say they would have offered me that position like 2 years ago, I would have said no, because I wasn't ready for it. But there's people that they're very egotistical, or they're very ignorant, and they'll say, yeah, I'll take that position. And guess what? They get overwhelmed, they can't handle it, and then they don't make it. So just allowing myself to get the experience is very, very important. Even though I would be making peanuts, I know that in the long term it's going to help me, because the experience itself is invaluable. You can't put a price on experience. So I'd rather take that route.
The other thing he said here is, how do either of you network professionally? For me, like I guess I'm not on a professional level, but networking for me, because like I'm working with people in the music business. Number one is, like I said earlier, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. Like to network, the first step is to reach out and talk to somebody. And then also be respectful. And
that's right.
Be willing to listen, because a lot of people know a lot more than you. Like you're more knowledgeable than me about a lot of things, and so being able to sit back and listen is a very big thing for me when it comes to.
Well, I have this statement that I like to go by. One of the ways that I live my life is like, if I go into a room with 5 people, I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, because at that point you've hit your limit. I want to be in the middle. And I think it's important that you surround yourself with not only with close relationships, but also in your professional development as in your career. Surround yourself with people that are always going to be teaching you. You never want to be the smartest guy in the room, because then at that point, what is there to learn? And it's worse when you think you're the smartest guy in the room and you're really not. So I think a way to network is to always look for mentors, always look to the people that want to give back in your career and guide you. And like you said, the way you're going to get there is to earn people's trust through respect and work ethic. If you could do that, then you're always going to have an open door to options, you know, and that's important. So I think that's a good way to network. It's just kind of like be respectful. You know, never want to be the smartest, never want to be the dumbest. You kind of want to be in the middle and just go through the doors that are open for you, because doors will open for you, and it's just depending on whether you go through or not. So that's what I like to do in my line of work as well. Just kind of always looking for people that are going to make me better, and also be confident on what you have to offer. Don't diminish your skills either, because I think a lot of people do that because they want to be like humble, but they overdo it to the point where they diminish their skills. And next, you know, they're kind of like they have a rep of not being able to handle the job. So it's important that you take pride in what you could offer, while at the same time keeping an open mind with the people that could make you better.
Right, definitely.
All right, so
next question is, how can I help teenagers 14 to 15 that struggle with anxiety and depression? You want to take that first, or me?
Yes, and I know you have a little to say about this as well, because you also have experience in this field. But let me say one thing first. When you're dealing with teenagers, you have to understand that they're in a developmental stage called identity versus role confusion. What I mean by that is that their identity is still very, very, very much attached to their family. Like, it's going to be rare, if ever, that you're going to find a teenager in this age bracket that's already fully developed as far as they know who they are. The teenagers always tend to still have a lot of their identity embedded in their family or embedded in their caregivers. So a lot of their anxiety and depression is not because of them. It's not internal to them. They're reacting to a lot of their family dynamics. And that's very, very, very common. Actually, it's probably going to be the most, unless there's a chemical imbalance, which again, that's a whole nother conversation. You're looking at a situation where a teenager is reacting to their family dynamic system. And that's what you have to look at. So if a teenager comes at you with anxiety and depression, the first question you're going to ask is, when did things change for you? Did something happen in your family where there was a change? And you could start to pinpoint the source of the depression and anxiety. So a lot of times you get something like, well, my stepdad just moved in about 4 months ago. And so boom, right there off the bat, you start to say, okay, is that around the time where you started feeling depressed and anxious? Yeah, you know, and now you have the source. So now you know what to treat, because it was the stepdad coming into the family dynamic that kind of set this kid at, you know, kind of set him off with the anxiety and the depression. And so now you could be more specific and tackling the reasons why this person is affecting them that way. And it's not always bad, because sometimes just having a new person into the environment could create this kind of anxiety and depression, because in a family, we have what's called structures and hierarchies. So a lot of times when a new man comes into the house, like a stepdad, he's threatening the hierarchy of that kid, especially if they're a teenager. So if the kid was the man of the house for a while, all of a sudden this male comes in, it threatens that hierarchy, and that's why there could be some anxiety and depression there. So now you know what to treat, and you could even bring the stepdad into the picture and talk about the respecting the hierarchy and respecting the kid's autonomy while he was the head of the household. So that's just one example that's very common. But to answer your question, Daniel, it's more this age bracket. I guarantee you that is never going to be an internal thing. It's going to be more a reaction to the family dynamics. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
Just for me, of how you can help them is, number one, listen.
Yes, right? Very important.
Especially, because being in
non-judgmental ear, by the way.
Right. And also remember that you was a teenager once as well. So everything that you were going through was real to you at the time. And a lot of times I see adults try to minimize what they're going through because they think our stresses are different than theirs. But whatever you're going through at the time is real to you. And it's difficult
That's
for
right.
you. So just that's how I've been able to help them. Number one, I try to meet them at their level, hear them out, and then I go from there.
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head with this idea that because teenagers, because their bodies are changing, and they're like a big emotional ball of, they're a big mess emotionally. As even a teenager that where everything is going right, they're still teenagers, so they're inherently going to be very emotionally reactive, and so they're going to be very overly dramatic most of the time. So even if you know, like let's say you're the dad and you're like, he's gonna get over it, and he is gonna get over it. Let's be real about it. And nine times out of 10, in this particular example I gave, you still want to respect the kid enough to make a big deal out of it, because to them it is a big deal. So we want to bring in the stepdad, we want to bring in the kid, we want to give the kid the sense of control, because remember, the kid's reacting to the fact that in this household where he had some sort of authority, because let's say it was him, his mom, and his little brother, he was a role model, for better or worse. He was the next guy in line to be part of that hierarchy. So now this other man comes in and takes that away from him. Yeah, he'll probably get over it, but at the time he hasn't. And that's what we have to focus on. And so we do validate the kid's feelings about it and say, yeah, let's meet together. Let's make it a big deal, because it's going to benefit the kid. The kid's going to feel validated. He's going to feel like, yes, I'm glad that they're bringing attention to it, because I need this. And then we talk things out. We allow the kid to feel in control. We allow the kid to say, yes, I don't like that this man's going to come and he's going to take my spot on the couch where I used to watch my TV. Then you start talking about compromises or whatnot, and then you resolve the problem. But I guess the most important thing that you said, if it's a big deal to the kid, let's respect that. Even though we both know, because we've lived through it,
right?
It's probably just a passing phase, right? And like in a few months, the kid's gonna move on to the next thing. That's fine. But at that moment, because the thing about when they're like this, when they have anxiety and depression, they're opening up a gateway to cope with that in negative ways, and we don't want that. We don't want the kid to say, oh, this man took my spot on the couch and I feel so invalidated, I'm gonna go smoke weed in the street corner. We don't want that.
Right.
We because that weed is a gateway to something else. So let's get in front of that, and let's just feel the kid. Let's make the kid feel heard. And sometimes that's enough, and then the kid will be like, okay, I'm cool, I'm gonna go to my room now, I have another TV there anyway.
Right.
Because the kid knows that his power was respected. You see what I'm saying? So okay, now they'll get over it. But yeah, so anyways, teenagers, look at the family. That's really where the troubles are with them.
And this last one is we can just take one down, since you guys look like you asked 5 questions. What are some of the quintessential films that every filmmaker should watch?
Okay. Oh, I didn't get into this with you because I was also in the film business for about 10 years, from 20 to 30. But that's for another time. Really? Yes. So that's why Cosmic is asking that question, because me and him talk, and I've given him. So here's the thing about movies. All right. You really have to see them from the time in which they were made, because movies that are influential at the time that they were made. So what happens a lot of the time is that a lot of people will watch like a movie from like 1940, and they're like, what the fuck's the big deal about this? It's like, it's just a fucking slow, it's black and white, what the fuck? But at that time, that movie was very influential because it created a new filming technique. Like, okay, well, the first one is Citizen Kane. You have to watch Citizen Kane because Citizen Kane had a lot of camera movements in it. And that was one of the first times where you see like a navigating camera in cinema. That was, and the storyline, the way it was told, there was techniques in that movie that were introduced for the first time that are still in use today to tell a story and in the cinematic form. So that movie is very, very important. I mean, we have like The Bicycle Thief from Italy. That was the Italians created something called the neo-realism movement, where, do you remember like the Wizard of Oz? Like, that's a stage, right? You see it as a stage, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. For a long time, movies were made like that. You go to the back lot and there was like a fake stage, but that was a movie. All right. The Italians were like, no, we're going to go to the hood. We're going to use real people. We're going to use real neighborhoods, everything real. It's going to be outside. The only thing that's going to be fake is the actors acting around the real environment. And so The Bicycle Thief was one of the first movies that did that. So that's a very, very important movie. Let me see what else. There's so many. Well, those are the 2 that I'll say for now, because those are, if you watch those 2 movies and then
I need
come at me with any comments.
Definitely check those 2 out. Since I'm not as knowledgeable about those, I won't even speak on them.
Yeah. What are some of the methods of self-reflection that you recommend? I think journaling is very, very important. I think journaling is one of the easiest coping skills and interventions that you could do for yourself. I think when we're in our emotional state, we tend to just concentrate on our negative aspects. I think journaling keeps you accountable. You know, I always tell people, I want you to write down your strengths, I want you to write down your goals, and I want you to write down your accomplishments, because when we're depressed, those are the first things that our brain takes away from us. It literally we're sitting there depressed and we're like, why am I here on this earth for? Well, if you have your journal and you open it up, you could challenge your depression, you could challenge your mood just with what you wrote when you were in a more logical state of mind. And it really, really helps. And it really helps with keeping a non-biased self-reflection of yourself, especially when you're going through depression and you really can't find anything positive about yourself, you know.
Right.
It also helps with ruminating thoughts and intrusive thoughts, which I'm sure you've experienced before, are very powerful and very,
very, very much so.
yes. When you have those thoughts in your head, the same thing over and over, and they're very negative, they're very intrusive, and more dangerously, they're once you get commands from them, that's when the SI could really escalate. Well, a lot of times when you start journaling, because what happens when you're going through intrusive thoughts is that you'll get an answer that you're satisfied with, but then you'll lose it. And then you're back to the ruminating negative thought again. And it's like, fuck, like you had the answer, but you lost it. And then you're right back to the negative thought. Well, when you journal, you don't lose it because you wrote it down, and you could always go back to it and reference it and say, okay, this is the answer to the problem that I keep on ruminating. This is a logical answer, especially when we catastrophize, which is a cognitive distortion, by the way. When we catastrophize, we keep on thinking about the worst case scenario over and over and over and over again. And even when we find something in our brain that's acceptable to us, the intrusive thought would just take it right back away, and then you're right back to where you started. So when you actually journal any kind of solution to your problem that's keeping you up at night, you could always just go back to that and have some sort of, peace within yourself and just go about your day. So journaling is very important for self-reflection.
Definitely.
What is the best way to deal with stress? Or okay, well, that we've talked about that a lot already. Just find a hobby, find your passion, and that's one of the best ways. Right. Self-care. We haven't talked about self-care. That's also very important. We live in a society where activity, being active, is looked upon as something that makes you successful and something that makes you worth your time, right? It's like being active. There's this idea that if you're active, that you're contributing somehow to your time on this earth, when the reality is that sometimes we need to recharge. Sometimes we need those 10 hours of sleep. We just do. And in the long run, it's beneficial for you to self-care. And that could be anything from like buying a video game for yourself, or going to buy yourself a good pair of shoes, or like treating yourself to like a facial, whatever the case may be. Just go do it, because it's very important that you care enough about yourself to say, I deserve this for this day. Even if you want to buy yourself like a $300 pair of sneakers, as long as it's not an addiction, you deserve that. And if you have enough money for that, then you should go ahead and do that, because it's self-care. You deserve it. You work hard. We put up with a lot of bullshit on this earth. $300 pair of sneakers ain't gonna do anything to like negate that. You know what I'm saying? So it's good that we self-care that way.
Definitely.
So that's a good way to relieve stress.
I definitely say pour into whatever you love.
Whatever
that gives you happiness, pour into that, and I think you'll relieve a great deal of stress. Like doing the podcast for me is a stress reliever. So
exactly, and for me too. And it could be anything, because I think a lot of times we limit ourselves in what could relieve our stress. Like, I don't care if you want to like turn on the radio or fucking put music in your living room and start like dancing like a jackass around. Who cares?
For real, have a jam session by yourself.
Who gives a shit? That's what you want to do, and it's gonna allow you to relieve some stress. But we put these the thing about people is that we tend to put these barriers on ourselves, because we're right away thinking, what are they gonna think of me? But what does it matter? Because they are not living in your skin. You're living in your skin. So again, if you're not hurting anyone or you're not hurting yourself, do whatever is going to relieve that stress at that moment, and it works all the time. But we forget that, because again, we're constantly worrying about what other people think. Even like taking days off from work. Like, we live in a society where it's like, oh, you're being selfish, you're letting the team down if you're absent, and everybody has to carry the load for you. Well, guess what? If I push myself past my stress level, I'm going to get sick and I'm going to be absent longer. So what do you want? I deserve a day just to not do nothing, because in the long run, it's going to be more beneficial for everyone. Everyone's going to win if I take this day off and recharge my batteries from work. Okay.
Exactly. You'll be no good if you're burnt out.
That's right. Because at the hospital that I worked at, I deal with that all the time, where people are depressed because they're like, oh, I'm here getting treatment and I should be at home taking care of my family and I should be doing this, that. And I say, wait a minute, you're making an investment in yourself right now, which is the best investment you could ever make. You're taking time out right now to reassess your mental health so that you could go back to your family, back to your job, and be more productive and live a more functional life. What's the opposite of that? That you continue to carry the strain of your mental distress into you hit your breaking point, which could be dangerous. That's not going to benefit anyone. And when you paint that perspective, people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But ultimately, we live in a society that actually punishes self-care, which is something that I'm also fighting against, because in this society, you're supposed to always be doing something, which is a false ideology.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, the next question is thoughts on the current state of the film industry, theaters, and indie blockbuster films, Hollywood streaming.
Yes, I'm very concerned because I think our societies, especially with COVID, didn't help. I think we're getting more and more. We're normalizing watching movies at home, and now people are investing in these like $1,000 sound systems, and nobody wants. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier about social media. It's like nobody wants to leave their house anymore, and you're really robbing people of that communal experience of watching a movie together, you know. And I get it. I mean, going to the movies could be a pain in the ass, especially if you have like a baby crying in the back and food is overpriced. But I don't know, man. I'm just a sucker for just sitting in a big old screen with some good surround sound and just watching a movie, especially like if it's a comedy. You know, comedies are always. I love watching comedies with an audience, bro, because it's just like they're fun. They're a great time. Or watching like a horror movie because you know you could feel the tension in the theater, and it helps with that. It helps with the experience of watching it.
Yeah, that energy is something different. Like watching Endgame in theaters was such a great experience, especially going in there with no spoilers, opening night, and everybody, you feel it. Like that theater experience is something that you can't replace.
That's right, and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. By the way, to me, I was telling Big D this. That's a perfect movie. Like,
oh yeah,
definitely. they paid everything off in that movie beautifully. Like everybody's
it was for us that stuck through and had been watching it since Iron Man 1. Like it was perfect.
That's right. Like all the arcs were everything. It was a great fucking movie, and that was a great experience to have. I mean, think about the whole Spider-Man thing that came out last year. It's like you watch it at home and it's like whatever, right? Especially because people know what the big secret of the other Spider-Mans coming in. But when you watched it in the theater for the opening night, like there was an energy there that you can't duplicate anywhere else except the theater, and that made everything more enjoyable. So my concern is that that's dying, and ultimately, like you said, is like we're all gonna go to a state where we're just never gonna leave our houses anymore, and that's gonna make me very sad.
Me too.
Because you're gonna
go ahead.
What you're gonna have is you're gonna have a generation of just like socially incompetent people, like you know, like they don't know. See, one of the things about like being 15 years old and going to like a show, like a concert or whatever, like I said earlier, it develops your ability to interact with people, which is something that does have to be developed, believe it or not. What we're gonna have now is a generation of like awkward people just kind of looking at each other and not knowing what to say. And I'll be old by then, so I'm okay with it. But I feel bad for the next generation.
Another thing about that too is it gives you real life experience where like people have the confidence to say anything on the internet because there's no consequences on the internet. When you in real life, you're not gonna say some stupid shit to that guy because that guy's gonna punch you in the fucking face.
That's right.
You got to deal with real life consequences. So it's like
100%. Yeah.
And I also think on to touch on that, the film industry and TV altogether, I think is getting overly saturated right now, and it's a lot of good out there. We have like a lot of good right now, but the bad is really bad, and
Well, let me ask you this: what kind of stuff do you like? I haven't even asked you. Like, what kind of movies are you into? What kind of TV shows are you watching right now? What's going on?
I love the whole Marvel everything. I am a DC, like I love comics, but DC is terrible right now. Although Peacemaker was great. I like.
Oh, I love Peacemaker. I love that show.
Fucking Moon Knight was fucking terrible.
I mean, I've heard most people have said that it wasn't that good, but the people that have defended it said that it was something fresh. It wasn't like totally connected to the MCU, which is probably what most people wanted, which I guess that translates into it not being so good. But I don't know. I always feel like maybe the creators of that show were like, let's give them something different. Let's just give them like an isolated story. But then I'm hearing now that it's not so isolated, and like there's connections to like Thor, like and because Thor has the whole gods thing going on.
Yeah, so maybe that connection to Thor and Black Panther. That's what I heard. So.
Yeah, that's the scuttlebutt. So it's like maybe that was like maybe Moon Knight is like the ultimate Easter egg, and then when we see it like 5 years from now, we're gonna be like, damn, there's a lot of shit going on in Moon Knight now in hindsight, that I've seen all these other movies that came after it that I wasn't picking up when it was on because it hadn't been revealed yet. So that would be kind of cool if that's what happens, If
we get a payoff for that, that'd be great. That'd be great. I like a lot of crime dramas. Like I like the whole Power universe. I don't know if you know about that.
No, well, tell me about it.
Power is like how I compare it?
Is that not an anime? Is it?
No.
Because that's something I don't like.
I love animes as well, but this is totally different. It's the original Power. It's like 5 different ones now. It's probably had the biggest universe I've ever seen of anything, like of all interconnected stories. Like,
where is this at?
It's on Stars. It's Power. The Power Book 1 with Ghost and Tommy. I don't know if you. It's about this guy who's a drug dealer, but he owns a nightclub.
Okay, I'm gonna check this out.
Yeah, Power, bro. Like you're in for a hell of a ride. Power is fun as hell to watch. I don't even know what to compare it to. It's just like the struggles of a drug dealer, but he's trying to be legit, and then he's trying to go legit, but everybody in his life is not legit, so he can't. So it's like,
yeah. Typical. That's a typical story, but it's fun too at the same time.
Yeah, it's fun, and then now he got a spinoff with his son. There's another spinoff with his partner. There's another spinoff telling the past story, and then there's another one supposed to be a political one. So it's good.
So it has a fan base if they keep on making them.
Oh yeah, the fan base is huge, and it's started. The show was created by 50 Cent.
So, okay.
So.
All right, I'm gonna check it out for sure. I'm gonna put it on my list because I've been waiting for some bingeable shit, and that evidently there's a lot of stuff I gotta catch up on when it comes to that show.
Yeah, Power.
So it'll keep me busy for a while.
The first 2 seasons, you're gonna be like, "What the fuck?" Like, okay,
yeah,
this is some good TV. I like stuff with good stories. Like I'm really big on, since I write, I'm really big on critiquing writers and stuff like that. So I don't like shows where things are too predictable, or you can just see the formula from the first. Like a lot of those shows where it's just, I don't mind, what do they call them? Like Freak of the Week type shows or whatever. But,
yeah.
But sometimes they get kind of annoying to me.
You want like a serialized story where it's one big old arc for the entire season.
Right.
Yeah, no, those are the best, of course, and that's what we've
from like in Power. You're gonna see Ghost, the main character, have such a great character arc that pays off at the very end, where it's just like, oh.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm a writer too, so that's something that I've always enjoyed good writing, and it's not even about being predictable. It's also about the journey that the lead character takes us through from beginning to end.
Right.
What kind of changes do they go through as they develop through the series? What kind of decisions they make while being under the influence of their character? In other words, if a character has insecurities, do they make decisions based on the insecurities, and then how does that affect them in the future? That's good writing shit, because you're getting deep into the character's motivations, and that's the kind of writing that I like, And did you ever see The Wire?
No, I want to go back and watch it. People keep telling me that it's amazing. So
that, if you're a writer, that's the show that you need to watch, because that show, it's a great show, not only as far as a written show, but it's also a great representation of how systemic a lot of the oppressive nature of like Black communities could be. You know, it deals with the politics of like the local government. It deals with the police department. It deals with the gangs, and everything comes together. And you see how at the very decisions made at the very top affect the people at the very bottom. And it's just it's a great show. You definitely check it out.
Right. Okay, I will check it out. I like character based stories. So like Breaking Bad was really good to me, and that's why I actually like. I don't know if you watch Better Call Saul. It's pretty.
Yeah, good. I've been watching it. Those are other two shows are also representative of great writing. You know,
great writing.
Because even like with Walter White, it's like you never really get to understand his motivation into the very end, where you see that this was a very flawed man who was guided by pride, essentially.
Right.
And you see that he lost his company very early on, and he was a failure for a very long time. And it wasn't until he discovered his ability to make like primo meth, he enjoyed that power trip that he got out of it, and that's what guided his entire behavior. But the beautiful thing about that show is that it's never written out for you. These are things that you discover by observing the character, right? And
it kind of tests our moral compass a little bit, because in the first season you're like you fucking hate his wife. It's just like, well, she's tripping, but it's just like really you should be thinking that, oh, he's the bad person. But it takes 4 seasons to where you get to where, okay, maybe she's not tripping.
Yes, exactly. And she's actually conflicted, because one of the cool things about that character, the wife character, is that we see the dynamics of her trying to be loyal to her husband, but also her going against her own ethics. And you see that balance throughout the entire run of the series. And it's beautiful, because that's great writing. Because yes, if a wife is married to a man like that, she is going to be conflicted. She knows it's wrong, but she also wants to be loyal to her husband, and there's going to be different dynamics there. Ultimately, her husband's pride ended up destroying the entire family, but that's a very fascinating show as well. So yeah, no, you're right. Well-written shows, and the thing about well-written shows is that they're going to stand the test of time, because one of the things that I've always said is that when you rely too much on CGI is evolving so much that you're going to be dated within the 2 years at most.
Right.
With a great story, is going to live on forever.
And that's what I'm a big fan of, stories. So like if you like you said, I'm gonna check out The Wire, because I've been hearing a lot about that. I like stories like that. And then too, like another show I like before we move on is was Dexter, until the last 2 seasons, where it kind of
well, that one, did you see when they brought it back, or you never even
I watched it and I was even more disappointed.
They only brought it back to kind of make up for how they fucked it up, and then you're saying they fucked it up even more, or maybe just the same.
To me, it's just like that would have paid off if they did it at the beginning, because the end of that story should have been he dies or goes to jail. Those are the only 2 options for his character. You don't get away with that shit, like real life.
That's right. That's right.
You either die or you go to jail. One or the other. That would have been perfect payoff. I would prefer he would have died or something like that, or got caught by Batista. Actually, that would have been a better ending.
Yeah, for sure.
That ending was, and then his son has to kill him. Just like, okay, y'all could have did this 7-8 years ago now. Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. So some good book recommendations. Well, lately I've been reading a lot of like self-help, like help books or whatnot, and so and then I've also been reading some like textbooks. So I've been reading kind of some boring stuff, so I'm not really gonna get into it. But when I do read some stuff that's kind of like quote unquote entertaining, believe it or not, and I don't know if it's a subconscious part of me, I do like to read all these memoirs of like recovered like drug dealers and like gangsters and stuff like that, like their autobiographies, because I like to
I was gonna recommend.
Yeah, because I really like to look into the psyche, because I could relate to that, right? Because I came up in the same way that a lot of these people came up with, and I like to just read the psyche and just kind of understand where they're coming from. And again, a lot of their decisions are not based on what they would want to do in life. A lot of their decisions are based more on what they had to do in life, you know. And I've always, one of the things that I've never been able to answer about myself, because trust me, I've been asked this a lot. They always ask me, what was different from you? Why are you here? Why aren't you dead or in jail? And I can't answer that. So maybe there is a genetic component in growing up in the hood and not following a certain trajectory. But I don't know what happened to where I was never influenced to go that route. I always had a more empathetic thing about me to go another route, even though I was surrounded by a lot of those guys and a lot of them became my friends. I was never involved in anything that would get me in trouble like that. So that's why I like reading all these autobiographies, because I want to see if there's something relatable to where I came from and the decisions that they made that I didn't make. So anyways, that's what I read a lot of, just different like autobiographies on like gangsters who are now like either found God or talking in prisons, or like former drug dealers who are doing the same thing. I always find them very fascinating because there's always a lot of wacky characters in those stories.
Oh yeah. One book I recommend if you've never heard of it is called Pimp by Iceberg Slim.
I have heard about it. I just haven't bought it, but I've been meaning to read it.
That book it's great. It's a great story from front to back. Like a lot of the language he uses is dated, because he was using the slang from the 40s and
50s. Which is good though, because you want that authentic feel to the book.
Yeah, and it was a genuine, like, great story from the beginning. And I'm like, oh damn, he really did that, and you can tell he wasn't glamorizing the life, but at the same time, it's really what happened. So
yeah, and that's what you want. Again, you don't want to sugarcoat anything. You want the truth, and a lot of these guys are very honest. And a lot of them write them for prison, which means that there's probably going to be some deaths in the book. So, exactly. It's good stuff just to kind of open your mind to a lot of what there's a whole culture that's never talked about, which is like the low socioeconomic neighborhoods and what kind of stuff they deal with that nobody ever hears about, because I feel like our society is very ashamed of that. But these books kind of bring that a light to that.
Right. And then another book I'm going to cheap plug myself is next year I'll be dropping my book, my autobiography. Don't have a name for it yet, so be looking out for that.
Good. Are you done with it, or are you still working on it?
I'm still working on it. It's gonna be a different type of a book, because what I'm gonna do is, since my story is not finished, I'm gonna have it to where if you buy the hard copy and the download and the online copy, you'll get automatic updates whenever I make an addendum to it. So.
And that's the thing that I've always, when I talk to a lot of at-risk youth or people that are very ashamed of their background or their history, it's like I said earlier, like these are experiences. These are, hopefully there comes a point in everybody's life that has been brought up that way, to where they accept a lot of the absurdity. Because when you grow up like I grew up, there's a lot of characters. Like you meet a lot of wacky people, for lack of a better term.
Oh yeah.
But when you're embedded in that, it's very traumatic, and it's very, we tend to more see it as very tragic or very disturbing in a lot of ways. But I think as you heal from a lot of your pain and you process a lot of that trauma, you start to think about that life, and it's like there's a sense of it's not that you miss it, but I mean there's a sense of like, I'm very grateful for the way I was brought up now, because I did meet a lot of characters, and these characters that you would never believe existed in real life. And there's a sense of like comedy. Now it's more of a comedic to me. Like a lot of these dudes that were out there, and some of the stuff that they did, a lot of these stories, and it's like, because I mean, I used to hang around at these crack houses, and it was like you see some crazy shit right there. And now in hindsight, it's just some wacky shit,
See, probably the most interesting part of my book is probably going to be a little bit of the hood stories, and then it'll be the part where I'm homeless, so people be like, damn, that really happened. Like all these stories are real. Like these really happened, real people. And it's funny now, but during the time, some of that wasn't funny. But
right. And part of my philosophy is it's very existential. It's like life is absurd. It doesn't make any sense. Like when you think about it, like a lot of this shit doesn't make sense. And I think once we accept that, we're able to see a lighter side of life, even in the darker times, because there's just a lot of stuff that just doesn't really even make sense, or in the end, it doesn't really even matter. So just kind of enjoy the ride as you're going along.
Definitely. The last question he has on here is, with Stephanie taking a leave from the business, what do you think this indicates for the future of the WWE?
I don't know. That just broke today. It actually just broke a couple hours ago. It's interesting. We've heard a lot of rumors about a sale coming up. We've heard a lot of rumors about Nick Khan being hired specifically to sell the company. So I don't really know what that means. It could mean she just probably burned out, and we talked about self-care earlier. Maybe that's how she wants it, just to take some time off, take care of Hunter. I don't know.
Right.
So that's a developing story. I mean, again, if Vince sells the company, it's gonna change wrestling forever.
Very much so. I was hoping it would stay in the family. I was hoping Triple H would take over eventually, but
that's not gonna happen anymore. I don't think he could handle that kind of stress, going forward.
Yeah. So it's up in the air.
Yeah, it's just so interesting how fast everything changed, because for a long time, and I'm talking even as recently as a year ago, Hunter wasn't going to be the heir apparent. It was going to be his company. The reason he was running NXT was to kind of like ready himself, prepare himself to take over like the big company. And then, he had the heart attack, and he kind of I think he's kind of out of the business. He's just kind of keeping an eye on it from a peripheral view, but most likely that's all he's gonna do, because he just can't handle it anymore. And then when Vince goes, I mean, I guess Nick Khan is gonna be the next one in charge, but he's all business. He doesn't have the mindset of creating good storylines or good characters. So it's gonna be interesting what happens.
Yeah, we're not gonna have an overarching person that is running this anymore. And then I don't know, it kind of leaves professional wrestling in a shitty place. It's gonna be a sad day when it's Vince's time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And if it becomes part of a conglomerate, I mean, we've seen what happened with WCW. You have too many cooks running the kitchen, and it becomes a big mess.
That last year was a disaster. Yeah. If that's any indicator, we're in for some shit.
That's right. You're right about that. And I worry about that, because I've been a lifelong fan.
Well, bro, I really appreciate you coming on.
It was fun. Thank you for having me.
Over Big D, but I think this might be better than his episode. I'm not gonna bury Big D here, but I think this might be better.
Oh, you just did, which puts a smile on my face.
But I really enjoyed it. I look forward to having you on again.
Next time we could tackle more specific subjects instead of being all over the place. Maybe we could just focus on, like I said, like depression or maybe some other stuff, and we'll get more in depth in those topics.
Right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Drop a like, subscribe. Thank you all again. Peace.
Yeah. Oh no. Let's get drunk and pop a show. Please stop running your mouth. Let's